Thanks for tuning in to the Nindie Nation podcast, a weekly show dedicated to games for the Nintendo Switch, brought to you by independent developers. I'm Jeff, joined by Josh.
Hello, Jeff.
Hey, Josh, we're here to walk you through the growing catalog of fantastic indie titles, from the games and developers you already know and love, to the hidden gems inside Nintendo's digital gaming paradise. We'll discuss what we're playing, what we think you should be playing, and as always, wrap up with a rundown of this week's sales and next week's new releases. But before we dive into this week's treasure trove of Nindies, we'd like to introduce a special guest for the week. Joining us from Miles and Kilo and Kid Trip developer Four Horses is Mick Waits. Thanks for joining us today, Mick.
Hello.
Hi there. Thanks for having me here.
So as we normally do, we get started by talking about a couple of games that we've been playing. So, Mick, you want to share with us what you've been playing on your Switch this week?
I haven't had a huge amount of time with playing games, but last night, just before my son went to bed, we did all gather around and have a game of Overcooked, which is it's a game that I think is absolutely fantastic. It's a lot of fun. It's a huge amount of stress as well. I ended up dropping out after just a couple of levels, and then my wife went on and played single player. I think she was trying to complete one level on her own for about 3.5 hours. So yeah.
Wow. And Josh, that's something that you've been playing. You play that with your kids and your family as well, right?
Yeah. What I oftentimes find myself doing is I'll go online and just watch YouTube Let's Plays, because when I play it with my family, I tend to get a little frustrated. Like, it's very stressful, but at the same time, it's so great, just because it's the minute details of having to get the plates out, then cook the meat, then chop the lettuce and cheese and all that. I mean, it gets out of control. And to try to I'm like a completionist trying to get 3 stars, and if I don't, it drives me nuts. But it is such a great game. Like, there's so many different levels, and yeah, it's great.
Yeah, and there's so I haven't spent too much time with the game. I have also watched a lot of YouTube videos. My favorites are watching the ones where you see families like almost split up over a level of Overcooked. Yeah. But so I got to ask, can you actually learn how to cook anything from Overcooked, or is it not that like detailed? Or I mean, are people like figuring out how to make a cheeseburger that never knew how to make a cheeseburger?
Well, it's very arcadey, and that's, like I said, you have to cook the meat, get it out. You can't serve raw meat, of course, and then, like you said, chop. Right. The main core of the game involves different stages. Like, there's this one where you're like in a wizard's academy where the stairs will just like randomly disappear, and if you're not careful, you'll fall. And then there's like you're on moving trucks, and you have to switch between the trucks as they pass by to get to the cookers, and then get to where you put the meals. And it's just that fun little detail that makes the game, pretty much. I don't have it on the Switch. I have it on the PS4, but I mean, I bet it's perfect for the Switch because just with the Joy-Cons, you just get everybody around it, and it's like the ultimate multiplayer game if you can stomach frustration. That is, because it can be stressful. But yeah, it's a lot of fun.
That's cool. Well, on my end this week, I have been, if you recall the last couple of weeks, I was very jealous of Josh for spending time with 20XTX. We had been referring to it as 20XX, but then unless someone's trolling me on Wikipedia, which,
I wouldn't
very
be
well be the case.
Yeah.
But so I looked it up, and it's supposedly pronounced 20XTX. But I started playing that this week. A mashup of Mega Man X and Rogue Legacy. You're going through randomized, procedurally generated levels in a Mega Man X style. I know Josh talked about it quite a bit, I think just last week. I wanted to share that. So you play the game, you go as far as you can, and every time you fail, maybe you get a couple new permanent upgrades or things like that. I was gonna sit down. My wife had just gone to bed. I was gonna play a quick 10-15 minute run of it before jumping into Octopath Traveler. And I was playing, and I got to another level, and I was sitting there, and I'm like, man, am I doing good right now? Because it feels like I'm doing really good right now. And before I knew it, I was at the boss stage, and then the next boss stage, and then so on and so forth. And then I completed the game, and lo and behold, on launch day for 20XTX, I have the number 7 world ranking for the daily challenge.
Congratulations,
Nice.
sir.
Thank you. And you know what? I actually haven't played the game since then, so
Leave while you're on top.
Yeah, absolutely. What about you, Josh? What have you been playing?
I've been playing. We talked about this briefly last week too. Well, we didn't have it yet, but Paddle Box just came out recently, and yes, it's about the deranged duck boxing guy that takes place in adventure stages. And yeah, I know you've been playing this too, Jeff, and it's quite the trip, I have to say. There's times where I absolutely love it, and times where it's just like, oh my gosh, I can't stomach this anymore.
Have you seen this game, Mick?
I've heard of it, but I don't really know much about it. I've seen the title of it about in various posts, but I don't know anything about it.
It was developed by Bromeo, who I think they're a Mexican / publisher / developer team, and yeah, it's very. It has that Punch Out feel to it, but it's all in adventure stages. So you like go around, like you go to a casino, the sewers, different factories, and it actually takes place like you're walking around, but in the Punch Out style. And then there's puzzles that you solve before you get to a main boss. That's where the Punch Out influences come in, and yeah, it's just really tough. Like Jeff, you were talking about this too when we were talking about it. How it just doesn't. It takes a while to get used to, and I felt like you could get used to the combat because there's no health bar really, but you know when you're about to get knocked out when the screen goes blank.
Yeah, you start seeing the duck get a little beat up and bruised, and it does the whole Call of Duty or whatever. The edges of the screen start blurring out and things like that. Yeah, but man, that game is brutal.
I think I made it further than you did.
You definitely did. I don't even know if I made it to the first save point. No, I played it. I really do like it. I'm going to go back and play some more. I do, if you are a glutton for punishment, well, we'll also tell you to check out Miles and Kilo. But it's a tough game. But yes, it's fair. Yeah, Paddle Box is fair. It's tough. You're gonna learn by failing. But if it looks like your style and you pride yourself on being able to beat Mike Tyson or Mr. Dream, probably worth taking a look at.
Yeah, definitely. If you have any interest in Punch Out, it'll appeal to you. Just be prepared to have your face knocked in a few times.
Of course. Well, this week we're going to keep some of the intro segments a little shorter because we want to spend some time with Mick. Thank him for joining us today and giving us some of his time on his Sunday evening. Mick, would you give us a little bit of an introduction about your history working with Nintendo, being an independent developer, and working in the Nindie scene and some of the games you've worked on in the past?
Yeah, certainly. I'll be as fast as I can because I've got 50 years worth to go through, sort of. So, I was born in the early 70s. I grew up through what I would see as the golden age of arcade gaming. I was young enough to play Donkey Kong when it was brand new in the arcades. And I had a fascination with video games from an early age because it was about one of the only things in life I was good at. And I taught myself to program along the way on a home computer. And then as I got older, I didn't really get into professional development until I was nearly 30. But I managed to move into a job in the video game development industry as a tester and eventually worked my way through into project management. But I always had that eye on the dream of being a programmer because of my hobby programming. But I never thought I'd ever get the chance with not having had the opportunity to go to university and train properly.
Can you share with us some of the titles before being an independent developer? Anything that we've heard of, or some horror stories from being a tester or anything like that?
Okay, my favorite horror story of being a tester. I mean, I was working the first game. I went to start working this game company, and I'm thinking as a tester, I was going to spend all day playing games like Crash Bandicoot to death, pulling them apart, finding out the bugs, and I was going to absolutely love it. Went into work on my first day, and they shoved a Barbie title under my nose. And the studio I worked at made quite a lot of Barbie titles. And it wasn't quite as a tester, but as a project manager, I was sent to deliver a set of Sony PlayStation 1 submission discs. Now, these discs used to cost, I think, about £25 each. They had to burn 10 of them for the master discs. And we were still working on the game right up to the last minute. And we would miss a payment if we didn't get the submission billed to the publisher by the Monday morning, and we were working on it on the Saturday. So given that there was no way particularly to ship it there reliably, they stuck me on a plane to LA. It was basically a 12-hour flight. I was there in LA for 6 hours and then 12 hours back. But as I was actually boarding the plane, they discovered a show-stopping bug. So what I delivered was 10 rather expensive coasters. Essentially, those discs were put in the bin as soon as I got there.
Oh, no. Man.
Yeah, that's one of my favourite ones. But an eye-opener for how video game development goes. One of the games that was being developed in our office was a third-person shooter, sort of war-based shooter. It was a Spec Ops. I don't know if it's related to the modern Spec Ops titles. I assume maybe the same publisher's still going. PlayStation 1. And there was a bit where an enemy had run inside a sort of bit of a broken building, and there was a hole in the wall where a window used to be. So I lobbed a grenade, and it was a perfect shot, and it just bounced off an invisible barrier. So I typed that up as a bug straight away. This grenade should have gone through that hole. And I was really surprised in the very next build that bug was marked as fixed. And I was really looking forward to being able to throw this grenade through this window. So I searched and searched and searched, and I realized I couldn't find this building. And the reason is because I couldn't find one that looked the same, because they just bricked up all the windows. And that is the reality of game development sometimes, I'm afraid. If something's too hard, it's just not worth doing. There's no payback, so just bypass it. But yeah, so I got a bit of a start in game development working for other people. Taught myself to program the C language, which was mostly used for video game development at that time. And along the way, I thought, well, instead of just doing silly little exercises, why not remake a game from my youth? Which I did. And then it occurred to me that we could just change the graphics a bit, from some new levels and some new game mechanics, and we've got a new game here. And people played it and quite liked it, so I sought out a publisher. And we got that published on DSiWare several years. I don't even remember what year that was published now. But I ended up working for the company that published that for me, developing their internal engine to run on 3DS, and thought, well, while I'm doing that, I could develop my own engine for Digger Dan to 3DS as well. So I ended up with the 3DS version of the game, but no publisher, because this company wasn't too worried about publishing it again. So that's where Four Horses came from. I set up a company because Nintendo, whilst they have now changed and they will deal with individuals a bit more, they're a lot easier to work with if you've got a registered company. And with having a track record with them, because I used to handle a lot of the admin side with Nintendo, sending builds off to them and dealing with the submission process. So they knew who I was. Mm-hmm. I was able to form a relationship with them and set up as a 3DS developer. So once Digger Dan was published, the problem I have then is I don't have a lot of spare time to work on more games. So I'd spotted this game, Kid Trip, which for me was a fantastic quality, really, really good game, made again by a solo developer, but one with a lot more talent than me, because he can program, he can design, can level design, and he can draw as well. So he'd done everything in Kid Trip apart from the music. And I convinced him to let me make a 3DS version. I'd actually made a mock-up screenshot of what it would look like and shown him that online in 3D. And yeah, it was great. I was able to get that out, and then the Switch came along, so it made sense to see if Nintendo would let me do a Switch version of Kid Trip, and they, after a couple of times asking, they agreed. and that was published in November last year. So yeah, that's my history up until just about Miles and Kilo.
That is fantastic. Yeah, it sounds, anytime we hear stories from developers that work with Nintendo, it sounds like there was quite a evolution of the way they started working with independent developers, especially over the last 2 or 3 years. And it sounds like you experienced that firsthand.
I think I may have possibly been okay because I set up a proper company, although they didn't like companies to be registered at residential addresses, and mine is. But yeah, the other big change for me actually was the introduction of the IARC system. There's no way I could have shelled out for the cost of getting the games rated. I would have never got that money back. I'd never had the money to spend in the first place. So yeah, Four Horses was set up on an extremely small budget. So that was another big change.
Where does the name Four Horses come from?
It comes from a slightly inappropriate story from my granddad. In his thick Yorkshire accent, Four Horses sort of sounds like something else has been said. And he used to have a mildly funny story that he used to like telling us. There was another one that involved the phrase "no more magic," which was another possibility for the company name, but we stuck with Four Horses in the end.
See, I thought it was you were going to go into the Four Horses of the Apocalypse or something epic like that.
Yeah, that never occurred to me, even for a good few months after the company was started, and until I started getting some Google results. It's like, oh yeah, those Four Horses.
Oh, those Four Horses, yeah.
I forgot about those.
You'd be ready for the apocalypse, I guess. But hey, for Kid Trip and Miles and Kilo, what were some of the inspirations, like games that brought you inspiration for making these types of auto runners?
Well, I didn't make them. They were made by a guy called Mike Burns, but his inspirations were sort of Wonder Boy and Adventure Island, the original Mario games. He's quite a young lad, but he's firmly rooted in the classics, as you would say.
Yeah.
So yeah, those games particularly. I mean, Runner obviously is an influence to a degree. Mostly Adventure Island, I'd say. He developed Kid Trip originally just for iOS because for a young startup indie developer, that was a very easy platform to get onto. So the game was very much designed around auto running and simplistic controls. And then Miles and Kilo sort of really took all the things he would have loved to have done with Kid Trip, but designed it more right from the start to work either on console or on touchscreen, just so that it would be more flexible. And it made it more of the sort of game he wanted to play himself, because he always wanted to play them on console.
Yeah, and I thought that was the neat thing about Miles and Kilo is that it can be an auto runner if you wanted to, or it can just be like an adventure title, like exploration, just going through like a platformer. And I thought that was really clever how that evolution came along.
Yeah, if you're going for the time attack, you're going for your fastest finishing time, then it makes sense to have auto run on, because then you don't ever forget to push the button, and it just takes the strain off slightly. But the design to be played either way was a key thing with Miles and Kilo. It wasn't the same with Kid Trip. People keep asking, can we have an option to turn auto run off? And it would be quite a lot of work to do it, and we'd like to do new stuff rather than go and change the old stuff.
Right. The realities of game development. It's not just file save as with the auto run option off. You mean it's not that simple?
No, it's really weird. Unfortunately, the auto run option doesn't work on my operating system. I wish we did. Same as the 3DS version button. That's become faulty in later days. We had a comment on YouTube, and I don't like to get into arguments with people online too much, but I did respond to this comment. It was on someone who posted a video up, and the guy's attitude was, well, they haven't even bothered doing a 3DS version. Well, if they're not going to support 3DS anymore, I'm not going to support them. I've taken Kid Trip off my wish list. And I'm curious to, one, how he thinks he's supporting me by not buying my game for nearly a year after its launch.
Right. That's the whole Joel's Watch'em. Have you ever talked to him or
I have, yeah.
The guy, yeah, Tui. Yeah, he put out Chicken Wiggle just on the 3DS, and I think the opposite effect is that people wish it was on the Switch. So it's sort of like you
Yeah.
have to have it on both to be successful, I guess, to appease everyone. But
The sad reality is that I could put maybe 2-3 months of time into getting Miles and Kilo on 3DS, which is what it would take, and I would never get paid anywhere near enough to justify having done that. And that's the sad reality is, you know, you have to sell the games to get the money back to justify the effort you put in. And for me, that is a lot of effort because I've got a daytime job. I've got a full-time job that isn't Four Horses. Four Horses is a part-time venture for me. It's just me. And any time I spend doing Four Horses stuff is time I'm not spending with my wife and son. So it's a hard sacrifice to make.
Sure, and on the 3DS, the discoverability is certainly not. You know, I'm sure games that aren't brand new or aren't on sale. I mean, they just get buried, and I feel like that's kind of the same with the Switch. But for whatever reason, the indies or Nindies, as it were, have seemed to, I don't know, bubble up. I don't know if it's more of a demand for the games. I mean, how have you seen so far, you know, the ability for gamers to find Miles and Kilo or even Kid Trip on Switch compared to your work on 3DS or DSi?
Well, it's an interesting one because my original game, Digger Dan, is still selling an okay number every week on 3DS. I certainly can't retire on the money by any means. So, I mean, that's over 2 years now since that came out, which it's nice that people are finding it somehow and still buying it. I mean, it's a very low price game, so maybe that's helping it be discovered. Kid Trip didn't sell anywhere near as many copies on 3DS as Digger Dan has. But on Switch, Kid Trip just in the last week has actually overtaken lifetime sales for Digger Dan. So it's been since November, so it's 7, 8 months, 9 months is it? Which is nice, but to be perfectly honest, it hasn't paid its way in terms of the amount of effort put into it. If we were relying on that income for living day to day, we'd have to shut up shop and get other jobs. As much as they talk about the fantastic successes on Switch for indies, I think there's a lot there who are going to be struggling. I think there's going to be a lot of little companies shutting down if their experiences are anything like mine, because the reality is Nintendo only really cherry pick some of the really bigger titles to promote of the indies. Sure. And the little ones do just get hidden. I mean, with Miles and Kilo, we were concerned that there were a month or two back, there were 30 Switch releases in 1 week on the North American eShop. Some of those were full price titles as well, but 30 things coming out, that means chances are you're not even going to be on the front page. So we made the bold decision that we were going to give Kid Trip away with every copy of Miles and Kilo bought within the launch period, thinking that people would just go crazy at the thought of getting a free game. But what we didn't realize is no one knew about it. The eShop, the way it's geared, it tells you what games are on sale. But for these owner discounts, where if you own one game, you get a discount from another one, they're only visible to you if you actually already own one of the games and then go and look for the other one on the shop, and then you see that there is a discount. There's no promotion for it whatsoever. So we tried to get out some news on the eShop news channel, on the Switch news channels, but the process of getting that sorted was just so slow that the news only got posted the day before the offer ended. So, but our figures, I broke them down yesterday. 3/5 of the people who paid full price for Miles and Kilo and therefore were entitled to Kid Trip free didn't download Kid Trip free. And I suspect that's because they had no idea they were entitled to it. And we did everything we could to shout about it because obviously we wanted people buying it. But that is the biggest challenge for an indie developer, and I suspect on any platform, it's not just Nintendo, is simply getting people to know about your game. There are so many games out there people can be playing, and the eShop's now getting quite full of games that are free to play as well. So it's hard to compete against the big boys, no matter how good your game is.
Well, yeah, like you said, when the president of Nintendo recently came out and said that they're possibly looking at getting 20, 30 Nindie games per week. For some of us, that's great because we love these games and just want more. But at the same time, you have to look at it from a developer/publisher sort of circumstance, in that, yeah, great games like Miles and Kilo might fall by the wayside if it's not having the proper promotions out on front on the eShop. So that is a concern.
Yeah. So what do you think about that, Mick? I mean, do you see, a rising tide raises all ships, or is this, okay, a lot of the smaller guys are going to have even more challenge if there's that much, sucking up the oxygen every week?
It's just, I mean, it's not going to be possible. I don't even know how they think there's going to be enough developers out there to feed them that supply of games. But even if there were, I mean, they'd have to get a Switch into the hands of every person on the planet for those developers to actually make a fair living off the effort they put into the games, because your buying public can only buy so many games. They can only spend so much time playing those games. So they're not going to be buying games that they're not going to play. They're going to stop that pretty soon. And the next big problem, I think, is just that there's so many people now just hold off for the sales, because sales are now such an expected thing. Why buy a game new? You'll get a half price at some point in the future.
Usually, sometimes maybe even after a month.
Yeah,
there's sales every week. Yeah,
I got slightly cynical, and I was saying to someone that I'm going to release my next game at $100, but it's going to be on sale with 90% off right from the start for the entire duration. Because if people see that discount button, the sticker, they'll buy it.
Sure, they do.
It's just that it got that effect on people. So it's sad because. I don't think people should be rewarded for holding off from buying a game. I think people who buy it new should be rewarded, and they should get the better price for putting faith into a game at launch and not waiting for reviews or waiting to see if it becomes popular from everyone else.
I was going to say, I've seen a little bit of that because nowadays, one of the things that we'll do here in a couple minutes is talk about the upcoming releases. And now if you're looking through the eShop, you're starting to see more and more that there's a pre-order bonus, and I don't mean the GameStop exclusive McDonald's rocket launcher with Call of Duty 7 or whatever it is, but more so if you pre-order the game any day before release, you get about a 10% discount. But to your point, Mick, most of the time these games are on sale for 50% off within 90 days. Yeah. But I see some of that. But you mentioned a good point that I'd never thought of. Even on the 3DS, promotions, not just sales and discounts, but promotions were really hard to come by. I remember I think it was like the Mario versus Donkey Kong game that Nintendo made, where if you bought it on the Wii U, you got it on the 3DS as well. And it was like their first foray into the cross-play, cross-buy type product. And the only way you would know about that is because they put something front and center. But a promotion where you buy one game and you get the precursor for free included, I can't even imagine where you would see that unless, on the Switch eShop news, for example, like you said. But even then, if it's on a Miles and Kilo channel, you would have to opt into that
I
first.
didn't even know it was free until I looked at the Twitter account.
Yeah, well, we'd really hoped that Nintendo would sort of think, hey, that's a fantastic deal. We'll shout about this on your behalf. And to be fair, Nintendo of Europe did, but their follower count on Twitter is about a tenth of Nintendo America's, and unfortunately Nintendo America didn't want to know. And from my point of view, I mean, it's going to sound very whiny, and I'm fine with that. I'm whiny. It's frustrating to see Nintendo promoting a game that's already been funded fully on Kickstarter and had significant success on other platforms, and then them jump on board and say, look, it's coming to our platform as well.
Sure.
We at Nindie Nation want to evangelize Miles and Kilo because, man, it's such a great retro throwback. Like, I can't. It brings me back to the good old days of playing the SC and the S and just how hard it is, but fair, And yeah, Jeff and I have been really enjoying it on that regard.
I'm glad to hear it.
And we've talked a lot about one of the games that we mention constantly is Celeste.
Yeah.
You know, this tough as nails, you know, micro challenges. You know, you've got a challenge that can likely be completed in 10 seconds, but there's a good chance that it's going to take you 5 minutes, and some of them will take you 30 minutes, and you'll make 45 attempts. Well, before you jumped on the call with us, Mick, we were talking about a level, I want to say it's towards the end of the second world in Miles and Kilo, where you have Kilo and he's pulling you along, which is when it's the auto run segment. And you know, to back up, this game is left to right auto run or platforming, where you are, you know, you're not exploring. You're trying to get from point A to point B as quickly and efficiently as possible. And when you fail, you start over at that level, but it's almost instantaneous. And that's what Celeste did that makes it so great. And I think that's so key to a lot of these games that want to give you that throwback aesthetic. Because, you know, when we were kids and we were playing these games on Nintendo, Super Nintendo, we had all the time in the world to wait for a game to start over. But nowadays, you know, with attention spans what they are, just in general, people want to, you know, if they're going to fail at something, they want to try it right away, you know, immediately. And Miles and Kilo gives you that, you know, one more level because I've got another minute before I've got to jump on a call or walk out the door or whatever. And I can try this level once, and it might take me 40 seconds to get through the level. It might take me 45 minutes to get through the level. And before you came on the call, we were talking about this level, I think, of the second world, where Kilo's pulling Miles along, and you've got to do like a series of triple
those little spin dash Sonic jumps off enemies. And I didn't know you could hold the jump button down as you were doing that to get a higher jump, and I just kept falling at this one part. But
yeah,
once I figured it out, you know, it was like, oh, duh, you know.
And that's the thing, is that like we both had a challenge right at the same spot, and we didn't look it up. We didn't talk to anybody. We just kept doing it. And and that just, those kinds of games are few and far between, where the game teaches you because of good design, and you're teaching yourself how to get through a level and how to learn new mechanics. I mean, I'm about halfway through Miles and Kilo right now, and there's still new mechanics popping into the game. There's new enemies. Yeah, the minecart stuff is awesome. I mean, and it's just, when you see it, you don't know what button to press. You don't know how to jump out of the minecart. You don't know that you can stand on the rail until you miss the minecart and you land on the rail and you're like, oh crap, I can jump back in the minecart.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah, and like that's just like, that's part of the joy of having these indie titles that bring back, you know, nothing but true gameplay and the challenge and the fun of trying and then finally accomplishing and getting to the next level. And Miles and Kilo does it in just superbly by letting you get in and out quickly, giving you a great challenge and something that's constantly changing. And as you said with Adventure Island, I mean, you'll notice in the first world, like, oh yeah, that's what my brain is. You know, that's the little memory nostalgia that's triggering. Is that first world really looks like Super Adventure Island, and then from there, you know, you get a really nice diverse set of backgrounds. But as Josh said, you know, it has our seal of approval. We do strongly encourage everybody to check it out. It's obviously out on the Switch eShop now. Yeah. And so please go check out Miles and Kilo. And if it's all right, I mean, we'll probably be doing a Let's Play of that fairly soon as well, showing everybody, you know, a couple of the levels and how the game works.
Yeah, that's cool. But you're saying about the harking back to games of the past. When I set up Four Horses, I sort of set that as my mission statement, is to look at the games from the past as inspiration, but we can drop the barriers that used to exist of how many sprites you could have on screen at one time and how much CPU you have. We can use these insanely powerful computers now to So essentially, I mean, what would Pac-Man be like with 1,000 ghosts and a much bigger maze, a 4K maze? I'm not necessarily saying it'd be a good game, but we can at least explore it and do that and see if we can see how much more we could add to the old games, that they just give them a bit more variety. And although Miles and Keel on Kid Trip aren't games of my own, they fit perfectly into that ethos. Particularly, I mean, when I was converting Kid Trip, one of the things I was very keen on was that there would be no load times, that by the time you saw the splash screen with the Four Horses logo, everything in the game would be loaded, and that you wouldn't even notice that take any amount of time from clicking the icon, and that everything's just instant. And it's how it used to be on cartridge, because there were no loading times, because the memory was just mapped directly to the CPU, and it was just all there. And I think we've lost a lot with modern games to some degree. I think there's so much focus on gloss and realism and story, and I don't always think the stories are that particularly well written that they should get that much focus, to be honest. But on some games,
yeah.
But I think there's plenty of room for just a game that's a bit of fun, quite simply, because isn't that what games should be? It should be play.
Bingo.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So you've been hot off the heels of Kid Trip, hot off the heels even more recently with Miles and Kilo, just releasing a couple of weeks ago. Are you starting to explore your next title? Is there anything you can share, or is that still too early to dive into?
There's no certainties, I'm afraid. I've got some ideas in my head. I've got an idea for a game that I desperately, strongly want to make that's sort of even more influenced by Celeste, really, as I think about it and as it evolves in my head, because Celeste, I think, is definitely my game of the year, possibly my game of ever. It's just so good. And one of the reviews sort of mentioned Celeste in the same breath as Miles and Kilo. And to be honest, that was like the proudest moment of my life. Stuff all this family stuff and being a dad, I'm far more proud of that. So yeah, there are ideas bouncing around, but there's reality as well. We need to make as much money from Kid Trip and Miles and Kilo as we can to sort of fund future work. So I'm looking at getting those onto other platforms. That's my next task, but finding time to do it is proving quite hard. But where we'll go, I mean, like I said before, any time I put into Four Horses is time I take away from my family. I'd really love to be doing this full time, but at the minute that's just not looking realistic. So I really don't know what the future holds. I'd like to make more games. Not entirely like Miles and Kilo on Kid Trip. I want to move away from the runners, but I want to do something a bit more platformy, but explory platformy, maybe. But we'll see. Mm-hmm. We'll see. I've got a few other ideas. I'd like to sort of do a new version of Star Fox, but like the original version of Star Fox.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Yeah. It's interesting to see how, the different generations, we just came off of, I feel like we're right at the edge of the 8-bit retro games, because those gamers that grew up playing those games are now developing games. That's why we saw Shovel Knight and Celeste and so many other games. And I think now we're starting to get into more of the 16-bit style. And so I've often wondered what happens when all of the gamers that grew up playing those games that frankly don't hold up as well nowadays. The first polygonal games is PlayStation 1 and even things like Star Fox. I mean, the game's fantastic. It's kind of hard to play nowadays, What happens when they start making games? That'll be very interesting to see.
Well, yeah, it will be. It'd be interesting to see something like Star Fox, though, with relatively low poly count, but a nice high definition and 60 frames a second, but with hundreds of ships, mass space battles going on rather than just a few things flying about, and still retaining that fluidity, but retaining the 60 frames a second and having really nice controls. That's sort of what I'd like to do when I say I'd like to do a remake of Star Fox, a game in that vein. I think it could be nice without requiring the fanciest graphics, without needing real HD realism. Just still
I'm sold. Pre-ordered.
Yeah. Jeff is like the resident Star Fox man, so yeah, you sold it to him. And like I said, whatever game you create next, we will be on board just because of the quality there. And like you said, it's not like a full-time endeavor for you, but it's still a passion that you have, which is oftentimes sometimes even better than if you try to make it a full-time thing and you lose the passion. So yeah, for whatever game you bring back, we will be on board completely. But speaking of new releases, you ready to hit on some of those now?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
See what we got coming out. Let's see, this will be July 17th. We'll hit on that day first next week. And this game, I'll be playing it, so I'll talk about next week. But Hand of Fate 2 comes out next week, and yeah, it's pretty great. It's already been released for PS4 and PC. We have Mugsters coming out on the 17th. Next is Touhou Genso Wanderer Reloaded. That comes out on the 17th. We have The Moose Man comes out on 7/18. And
that looks kind of like a Inside or Limbo, like a artsy, slower, side-scrolling platformer of sorts.
Yeah.
That's what at least it looks like to me.
From the little bit I played, it's basically there's no running, but you solve environmental puzzles by sifting between environments like the spirit plane and then the real world. So it's very unique. It has a very deep storytelling element of whatever indigenous tribe is located in that area. So we have Animal Rivals Nintendo Switch Edition coming on the 18th. And this one looks neat. Pool Panic comes out on the 19th. Yeah, that's one.
The Adult Swim, ridiculous. Yeah.
That does look fun. I saw a video for that for a while ago.
Here's one that I know Jeff will really love. Sausage Sports Club.
And what the hell does that mean?
I don't know. A few episodes ago when I made my remark about the hot dogs, yeah.
Yes, the 4th of July hot dog party.
Yeah, exactly.
I forgot about that.
You were thinking something else, but yeah, that looks that comes out on the 19th and looks pretty interesting. Frost comes out on the 19th, and this is like a survival deck building game. No Reload Heroes comes out on the 19th.
This one looks neat. It looks kind of like a party mode version of maybe like a Helldivers or Alien Nation, or it looks like a twin stick shooter, pseudo RPG elements, but a little more lighthearted, not as serious. Looks like this one. I'm gonna keep my eye on this one. It looks like sort of
like a Portal, like a indie Portal game. Tanzia comes out on the 19th. This is like a open world. Like in the same vein as like Ukulele, but I mean not as lighthearted as that, but has the same general feel to it. Lost Phone Stories comes out on the 19th. Ghost 1.0. Jeff, you've been talking about 20XTX. Well, you should check out this game next if you're harboring for another Metroidvania-like title, because it's pretty neat.
Yeah, I know you've been playing that. Look forward to hearing more about it.
Yep. Arcade Archive City Connection 7/19. We have Chicken Assassin Reloaded 7/19. It seems like, man, this goes on for a while. We're already getting.
So last week we have the Bomb Chicken, and now we have Chicken Assassin. What? Why?
That's what I'm saying.
Chicken Wiggle later in the year.
Yeah, Chicken. Yeah. That was Game of the Year last. Yeah, like I said, it seems like we're already almost to 20 titles for this week. Guts and Glory comes out on the 7/19. That looks like a trial sort of game. ACA Neo Geo League Bowling, retro title. We get those every week. Starship Avenger Operation Take Back Earth comes out on the 19th.
It is a mouthful, but it looks like one of those side-scrolling Life Force or Gradius or those style games. Looks side-scrolling shmup. Cool. And as always, it is a Nindie, so almost guaranteed to have roguelike and RPG elements.
Common theme running through every game. Hiroki, we talked about that last week. It's coming out on the 20th. VSR Void Space Racing comes out on the 20th. Spheroids comes out on the 20th. And then finally, the one you've been waiting for, Werewolf Pinball, comes out on the 20th.
This team, whoever this team is, Enjoy Up Games, they've been doing, because didn't they have like Duck Pinball last week or something? They seem like they're kind of going down the path of
becoming the
like
pinball
FX.
masters.
And yeah, but theirs is just a little more fantasy based.
We're already seeing that effect come into play, I think, of just a deluge of new releases each week. So
for sure. What about from sales? I'm looking right now. I see Letter Quest Remastered is 75% off right now.
That's a good price. If you like anything that's RPG based, where you can like make up words and then however complex the word is, it deals damage. So that's a neat little title. I have it for PS4. So
we've got the new Super Destronaut DX coming out. And it's brand new and it's 15% off. That makes it, from $5 to $4.24. Still a fairly inexpensive title, but looks like a fun Space Invaders like.
That does look good. It looks like there's co-op as well.
Yeah. And that's what else did they develop that we just recently? It's how do you pronounce it? Ratalaika?
Yeah, I think that's
what
right.
else did we recently play from them?
Something like that. It seems like they have a new game every week almost.
Let's see. Wow, they've got 11 titles on the Switch.
Yeah.
Oh, Devious Dungeon from our first episode.
Yeah, the one you've been. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. All right, I'm going to check that one out. Add that to my wish list.
And
or maybe that'll be the game I buy on this week's episode.
Yeah, it's inexpensive, so I can see it. Mm-hmm. Castle of Hearts on sale. That's a good side-scrolling, like Castlevania-like title if you're itching for one of those. Aegis Defenders is on sale. And yeah, that looks pretty neat, actually. Like, has a retro art style with, like, base building mechanics. Squid's Odyssey, that's something we talked about last week. I was more keen to it than Jeff was, but that's on sale as well.
I committed to playing more of that game when we talked a couple of weeks ago, and I did play more of that game.
And
my opinion's about the same. Okay. I just couldn't get into it. It seems like if you're and I tried doing it with just the touchscreen mechanics, and I actually found I preferred using the stick and buttons more. But
yeah,
it's cool. There's a lot there. There's definitely a lot there. Like if you invest in that game, you're gonna get your money's worth out of it.
Oh yeah, no doubt. Finally, I'll end with Slime Song Super Slime is on sale, and that's a really neat. Ultra retro like platformer that has quick runs and everything. Like each stage is only in one frame. I mean, there's tons of sales going on, so just check it out.
And remind us, Mick, how much is Miles and Kilo and Kid Trip?
Kid Trip is $3.99 in the dollars department, and Miles and Kilo is $7.99 because Miles and Kilo's got about twice as much content as Kid Trip.
So buy those first, yeah. Before any sale.
Miles and Kilo is a great game to whatever else you're playing. It's one of those games. That's kind of how like Devious Dungeon was for me. Whatever else I was playing, when I only had 10 minutes, that's what I played. Miles and Kilo fits that void really, really well. If you're looking for something for just a quick play, pick up and play, but, you're going to get sucked into it and play for hours on end. I mean, it's a great game. We all strongly recommend it, especially at $7.99.
Yeah, I think it's the sort of game that other people in the household will just grab and play as well once they see it, because it's the sort of thing where you want to have a go when you see someone playing it. It
is, and even when you fail at it, you know why, and you see why, and you know exactly what to look out for and change on your next run, and it's not punishing in a frustrating sense. It's a punishing in a motivating sense, I guess I would say.
It is, and it's immediately appealing.
Well, thanks everybody for listening and hanging with us for this week's Nindie Nation. We have a lot of great games to talk with you about next week, and look forward to diving more into some of those titles at that time. Want to give a big shout out and a thank you to Mick from Four Horses for joining us today. Mick, thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Yes.
Oh, thank you for having me on. Good to talk about my games.
really appreciate hearing about your story, your background in the industry, and obviously any opportunity to talk more about Miles and Kilo has been great for Josh and I. Josh, you want to tell them where they can find us?
Yeah, on Twitter you can find us at Nindie Nation. You can find us on Facebook. We have a Facebook group there that you can join. You can find us on YouTube. Just look up Nindie Nation there. We're on the Nintendo Village at thenintendovillage.com, and yeah, you can find all their shows. Lots of great content there to consume. We're on iTunes. So just go anywhere, rate us, subscribe. Anything to help us get out there and spread the greatness of Nindies would be appreciated. And how about Mick? Where can they find you at?
Generally on Twitter, it's at 4HorsesGames, so FOUR Horses Games, or our website is 4horses.co.uk because we're based in the UK.
Also, I have to plug, I took a stab at a Let's Play this week. I put up about 30 minutes of 20XTX. Unfortunately, it's not my, seventh in the world for the launch day run. It's just a generic, I'm going to talk while I'm playing the game run. But if you're interested in 20XTX, my goal with the video was to explain everything you need to know about it while showing you 4 different stages. So please check that out. Make sure to stay tuned, and we'll be back next week with more indie games. And until then, keep those Joy-Cons synced.